Hello, good morning or good afternoon to everyone attending Virtual Thursday. This is our 12th presentation for the year. My name is Mark Wolf, and we are going to go ahead and get started so we don't waste any of your time today. Today, we are going to demo a new feature in emergency reporting. We have a brand new staffing module that we're going to be reviewing with everyone. Again, my name is Mark Wolf, lead international trainer. On board with me today, Mark McKleroy, we call him Mac. He's our lead trainer. Greg Simmons, Regional Trainer James Angerett, Regional Trainer, and Nicole Beard, our training coordinator. And we also have one of our part-time trainers hanging out with us, Michael Bozzoni. Thanks for being with us all today, folks. Appreciate it. You do have the opportunity today to post questions to us as we're going through the presentation. My wingman and lady that's out there will help us out answering your questions and jumping in and interrupting me, and we'll demo things if it's appropriate. We're going to get to them all, and we'll strive very hard at that. We have a large group with us today, so but please don't hesitate to put any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll be able to review them and get answers back to you. And we do ask you to please stay on topic today with the staffing module. Cover a few of our training opportunities with you. First of all, Virtual Thursdays. Hey, they're free. First Thursday of every month, 1100 hours Pacific time, just the time to whatever time zone you're in. We do provide online training. Essentially, for the most part, that's in 3-hour blocks, and we can customize that training to meet your needs. We do, when we're allowed to travel, provide on-site training. Right now, it's restricted to trainings that we can drive to, and we have green lit between the states of our trainers and the site. A few other rules to apply to that, but we do have on-site trainings that are going on. We are scheduling a regional training academies for 2021, and I'll show you a few dates that are coming up here in a few moments. And we also have our Adapt 2020 virtual summit that is taking place later on this month. The Adapt Summit is taking place on November 17th, 18th, and 19th. Over 3 days, 20 speakers, 50 sessions. There's a few of our presenters that you can see at the top of your screen there. It's an exciting program. We actually did a little bit of a practice session today on that, since some of our speakers are not familiar with using the software that we're going to be using to present that. So I think you're going to see an exciting program that day, and there's going to be 50 sessions, and 18 hours of those will be covering working in emergency reporting from your trainers and the training staff. So our regional training academies that are coming up for 2021. Jacksonville, Florida, April 13th through the 15th. Austin, Texas, May 11th through the 13th. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, June 8th through the 10th. And Charlotte, North Carolina, August 3rd to the 5th, all in 2021. Go to this website, emergencyreporting.eventbrite.com, to learn more. And those RTA tickets do go on sale November 20th. You can also visit our website, emergencyreporting.com. Go to the customer success section, the training and learning center, and you can learn more about our regional training academies. We call them RTAs. And also, if you would email us at training@emergencyreporting.com, one of us on the training team will get back with you. So, staffing module, we are going to jump right into it. What we're doing is currently we're combining the shifts module and the daily roster module in one place. We call it staffing. You'll find the module button right here. I've highlighted on your screen for staffing right below shifts and right above calendar. One thing I want to mention to everyone is that the legacy modules for shifts and for the daily roster are still going to operate as they have in the past. There'll be no changes in here, but that information, if you create a daily roster in the daily roster module or a shift in the shifts module, they will both be displayed in that new staffing module. Now, the intent is eventually, after we go through our beta period, that the shifts and the daily roster modules will go away and be replaced by the staffing module. I am going to, before we jump into that module, I am going to jump back to the admin module, because we do want to show you something that you will have in your roles and permissions. Now, when the staffing module was deployed the other day, we anyone that had permissions to get into shifts or the daily roster will be able to get to the staffing module. So you see in your roles and permissions, right towards the bottom of the list, you do have a new role and permission for the staffing module to turn it off or on. And that is an algorithm between the shifts module and the daily roster module. If you have those permissions for yes, for daily roster, and full access for shifts down here, then it will turn on full access in the staffing module. So you will have that capability if you want to turn that off if you're not going to use it. But if you're going to, obviously would leave it on there. I just want to point that out to you. That is a new role and permission, and you'll see additional permissions in that staffing module once we get the beta period over and they roll it out full time for everybody. So let's just go ahead and jump into the staffing module. So we got a completely new look here, and we're going to go over a few things on the page. First of all, you'll notice up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a send feedback link. If we select that link, you're going to get a pop-up dialog window, and what we're requesting is your name and email address, and put in your feedback for the staffing module. Once you get that data put in here, just go ahead and give that good old send feedback button a mouse click, and that feedback goes directly to our development team that's working on this project. So they'd love to hear from you, and we'd appreciate it if you guys would put in any kind of feedback you have to it through the send feedback button. Now, if you find something may not be working quite like you'll want to, send feedback. Please do not put in a ticket for our support team. Send the feedback here and our team can get back to you. That's why we want your name and address, your email address for the feedback. So that's your go-to place to give us feedback on the product, is using that send feedback button up in the upper right corner. So we've got a few views here. The default setting is the calendar view. And we can see that here. We're listed to the calendar, and we see it by month. We've got a few days here in the month, and I'll scroll down a bit to show you that any shifts that I have in will be displayed appropriately with the color code that I've selected for that shift. And if I have a daily roster for that particular day, you're going to see that on this calendar as well. And that is going to be the orange color. You'll see I have one here for the 5th of November that I generated up here for you to see that already. So the month view is the default setting on this. We can switch to the day view up here in the towards the upper right hand corner of the calendar. We can switch to day view, so we're going to go straight to today, and we can actually pick up days off of the calendar and move through them just like that by selecting it off the calendar, or we can, using the arrows, we can toggle through days as well in that day view. Very simple. We'll go back and we switch it back to the month view. And we go back to the month view of the calendar. Now in the month view, we can toggle through months by selecting our arrows, going back and forth. As you can see, I went all the way into January. A couple mouse clicks back, we come back to November, or we can select the month and toggle between months as well. And we should have went to, let me pick a day here. So August, we went back to the August 2020 calendar. That if I select today, it's going to bring me right back to the month that today resides in, which is of course November. So that's basically toggling through the calendar view, the day view, and how you get the different months, different days in that. go to a few other items up the top here. Now we're looking at the calendar view of the shifts and rosters. We can also go to a shifts list. So under the calendar with that drop down arrow, we can pick up that list. We can go to the shifts list, and there's a list of shifts that I have active in this account. And likewise, if I go to the rosters list, we can go to it very quickly like that. We do have some filters at the top. We can filter by name, status. So let's say we only want to look at our open rosters. And by name, we can filter it that way. And you can see we have a default setting of 25 items per page. We can change that to 50, 100, or 200, depending on what you might need. I'm going to show you that the system here with the shifts in the calendar view and the list, they're designing this to be mobile friendly. So what I will do is show you how this will look. And I've just minimized my screen. And if I just pull that over here, you'll see that it'll adjust to your screen size on the machine you're using. So whether you're using a phone, a tablet, or any other kind of device, it will be mobile friendly for you in the view that you select for it on that particular device. And I can mimic that on my computer monitor as well. So mobile friendly. All right, so we looked at the calendar view, shifts list, calendar list. We have basically some filters available, and not only filters, but we can sort them alphabetically, ascending or descending, stations, ascending, descending, status, ascending, descending, whichever filters and sort that you need on that. Let's go back to the calendar. We looked at all the feedback or the settings on that. Another thing we can do with our shifts and the rosters is we can filter them. We have a filter here, so we're looking at all shifts. If I want to turn off all shifts, I will just be able to pick like whichever ones I would like to see in the filters. So I've just got a couple of them selected for my shifts with the filters, or I can look at all of them that are out there. If you have overlapping ones or ones that you're not too concerned with, you can turn them off with the shifts. You also have the capability of selecting my shifts down here at the bottom, and that will only display the ones that has your name as being the creator of that shift attached to it, displayed on your page. We have the same capability on the rosters to filter by that. So with this, we can filter by the status, whether it's open, closed, or archived. And you can see that one I had for today went away when I selected open to uncheck it, and I'll put it back on here for you. And you also have that capability of selecting my rosters, so you only see the ones that you have created. So let's take a look at my notes to make sure I am getting everything for you. And so far, I think I'm on track with that. Yes, Mac, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, had a question that said, can you make it read only also, as far as the staffing? Just to let y'all know, it's either full or none at the present time on the staffing module, but it's actually taking your permissions from shift and rosters and folk are pulling those over on there. So if they have permissions on shifts to make shifts, then they would actually be able to create new shifts and stuff like that. But if they do not, then it won't. It will take that new shift and stuff off of the top page up there. Is that correct?
Thanks, Mac. Yeah. So currently, right now, I showed you the permissions. The permissions are going to be embedded with the current shifts module, like Mac was describing, in the daily roster module, which you can set them to read only, so that they can't create new ones or edit existing ones, but view them. That should translate right over here to staffing. I cannot do that with my login right here to demo that for you because I'm the primary administrator on this particular account that we're looking at. But Mac is entirely correct. Your permissions from shifts and daily roster will transpose into here, and you'll see those permissions all get merged into the staffing permissions when we do a full rollout on this. Okay, good enough. Let's go up here to the top of the page, and we're going to talk about the unavailability button we have at the top of the page. So if you have personnel, if you're using this, you can add personnel to this. So if I want to add someone as not being available, I'll pick them off of my personnel list, and we'll give them a start date for that unavailability and an undate. Maybe this is one of my volunteers that went on a vacation, and I can put in a reason for that if it's appropriate. And save it, and you'll see that they will appear on the list here like that. Now, one of the things with this in the staffing module is when we do put somebody in unavailable status for a certain period of time, if we're going to create a daily roster, we have a column in there that you'll see that status displayed, whether they're available or unavailable. So it could be a very useful thing for you on that particular section there. Fairly simple thing. If we need to edit it, we can. Click the edit pencil, change any of the data there, and if it's appropriate, we can delete that as well. So that's unavailability button at the top of the page. Let's switch back over to shifts and roster. So you can build a new shift in the staffing module. We've got a button here for that right at the top of the page. New shift. We'll select that, and we'll go into the page. Now this has 3 pages in it, and we're going to call this one for the Thursday 2020-12. The station assignment to it is optional. You don't have to do that. We do have to add a color to it with our color palette, whichever one we would choose to use. We're going to use one of these pretty green colors here. They're all associated with a code number. And when we select next on this, we're going to go to the schedule page. Now the flow of this is slightly different than you're used to. However, we're going to start this shift, let's say tomorrow, and we're going to end it. We have a quick pick button now here. We don't recommend that you build a shift for anything more than a 1-year period in general. The reason for that is it takes a long time to generate that in the system, and you may have an excessive wait time for it to do that. And quite frankly, from my experience, typically you're going to be modifying the shift at some point in time anyway, so you don't want to make these for a lengthy period of time. So we're going to just select 1 year. This is going to take us out to November 6th, 2021. And we're going to do our start time. A couple of ways you can do this. You can just enter the times in here. Now in the architecture in the background, I just want to mention to folks, if this shift would start at, let's say 0600, I cannot use my tab key to go to the minutes. I have to use my arrow, my right arrow key. Then we can go over there. If I selected my tab key, it would take me down to the duration field. So in this particular case, in my shift, I'm just going to have it for 12 hours. Now we're going to do our scheduled dates. We can do this a couple different ways. A recurrence, which is days on and days off, or we can select weekdays here. We're going to do a days on and days off because that's how most departments work. And how we would do that, now what we're going to be doing is starting on this particular date, so November 6th. And we're going to have it on for 2 days. And I'm going to separate this by a comma minus 2 days. So I've got 2 days on duty for 12-hour shifts, and then -2 is 2 days off duty. And you essentially need to know the entire rotation. Some of them are pretty simple. If you work a 24/48, it's 1 day on, 2 days off. Pretty straightforward. Some of the other rotations are quite complex, and you may need to go back and through the whole entire rotation is figured out using numbers separated by comma. The days off are represented by a minus sign. So once I get that rotation put in here, I can go ahead and select my dates, and it will put that rotation that I just selected down on the calendar. Now, another way that we can do this is, I'm going to strip out this information here, and we can just simply come down to the calendar and pick days. Now it wouldn't let me pick 2 because this doesn't start until the 6th. So you can pick individual days and go forward that way as well. However, by using the rotation with our numbers up here, comma, 2 comma, -2, and we're going to be on for 2 days, comma, off for 3 days. Select the dates, take a look on our calendar down here, and we'll show you the entire rotation throughout that time period that we've selected. When we get done with that, we are going to get to select the next, the bottom or upper corners on page 3. This is where we're going to add our personnel. So we're just going to pick a couple of folks on this particular shift and add those personnel. We can filter them by rank. Here's where that status is going to be showing for you. So if I have somebody that's unavailable, they will be displayed here as unavailable. We can actually filter the list that way as well. I'm going to go ahead and add these 3 personnel, and you can see at start time is 0600, 12-hour duration, and we can attach them to an apparatus if we choose to do so. So in this particular case, and there's benefits of doing this by building a daily roster, it can help you with that. I want to set these folks all to engine 101 and step through this process to show you how we do that. Now, there's also, having put them in here, we can do a bulk operation up here. So what I'll do is we'll take all these 3 folks out. We'll add some more personnel. I'm going to pick a few people at random here and add them to the list. I'm going to select all 3 of them and add them all at one time using the bulk fill to engine 101. Just a little bit of a time saver for you if you can want to do that. You will notice at the bottom of the screen that you have only 25 items per page, but you can expand that again up to that 50, 100, and 200. And we get done with that information. So we've got our shift built, got personnel onto it. I'm going to finish and lock it. Remember, they do have to be locked to be able to use them within the system. And we've just created that new shift, and it's in this nice pale green color out here on our calendar. And if we want to filter that, we want to see that one right there, just to filter that so you can get a little bit cleaner look at it there. Perfect. So let's say we need to add a shift date. We need to throw another shift in for these personnel. We got a button right between new shift and new roster. Add a shift date. We're going to add this one for Virtual Thursday 2020-12, the one I just created. And we're going to add that for the 12th. We can add some personnel to it, just like we did before. And then again, assign them to apparatus. We'll put them on the ladder truck this time. And we'll save that. Now we go back out to our calendar. You will see that we added that particular shift for the 12th. Let's go ahead and filter that again for you, just so that we can see it a little bit better. So we added that one to the calendar. So that's how we can add a shift date on the fly. So that is basically the shifts. Let me refer back to my notes. It looks like I've got everything on here. Before I go over to the rosters, what I want to do is pause and ask Mac, Michael, James, Greg, Nicole, do we have any questions we need to address right now?
I think we're getting most of them. Mark, there is one that says, does it remember the item per page, or do you have to remember to change it? I'm not sure exactly what Brian is asking there.
I am not understanding that fully either, Mac. So Brian, you said Brian put that in here. Brian, if you can add something to that, to what exactly you're looking for there.
Okay. He said, or do you have to remember to change it when you move within staffing to the next screen? I'm still unclear there. Brian, if you could give us a little bit more clarity there.
Maybe he's asking this since I put a shift in here. I'm guessing here. Does this shift I just created display in the shifts module? And yes, they are talking back and forth to one another. And so you can see, even though this shift that I created today in the staffing module is coming back into the shifts module today. And if I make one here in the shifts module, it's going to be seen in the staffing module. Maybe that's what he's asking about. Kind of taking a stab at that.
Right. Yeah. And the other one says you should be able to select personnel by shift in the select personnel screen. We are aware of that. That's something that's already been put back to them of how you do it in the legacy. Now you can go in and select personnel from shifts that actually pulling from your personnel list in admin as to what shift you put them on. And that's already been some feedback given to them. But by all means, please go up and send feedback. That will go directly to the development team, and they will know that that's something they need to add in there. So I know you're probably going to cover that a little bit later, Mark, but just since we have that.
Hey, very, very timely. Thank you for the comment on it. So this is the screen that he was asking about, whoever that was out there. When I am adding personnel here, you'll see that the only filter I really have is rank and that status column here. Typically, and right now, if you go to the shifts module, you'll also have a filter by shift and station. So we're missing a couple of them here. Like Max said, we've already identified it. It would help out if you folks watching this, if that's something you use, and I'm pretty sure you would, is to please go into that feedback and say, put a comment about that. I used to be able to fill my personnel and filter that by shift station, and you don't have that available in the staffing module. We would appreciate that. Thanks for that comment. All right, I'm going to jump into creating a roster and what that looks like. Here, I've got some papers to shuffle around a little bit, find the right page. I've got some notes, and I want to make sure I cover everything here. All right, so we got a couple of new features that we're going to show you in here. Kind of exciting stuff for us. So right now, we're going to go ahead and select to add a new roster. And we've got that up. We're going to call it roster for today. We still have our fields to fill in, start date and time. So if we're going to start this, we're actually going to generate this for tomorrow. And we're going to start this for 0700. So on the 6th at 0700, our roster is going to start, and that roster will carry over to the 7th at 0700. This is a different format. Right now you have to type it in. Now we can go to it. We can scroll down through our hours and minutes if it's appropriate and select set, and it will throw that date and time in here. Officer in charge. So if we have a officer in charge that we need to note on that shift, your personnel list will be here and available, and we can note that. If you're associating it with a shift, and this is just pretty much of a notation, these are the shifts available in the admin module that we've got created. So that's page 1, our details of it. Gives us a good starting point. So our name, start date and time, end date and time, who's in charge, and the shift it's associated with. When we select next, stationed apparatus, there's a couple different pages in here we're going to pick. First of all, this looks a little bit different because on this page, not only will you select the particular station that you want to staff in the roster, you can select the apparatus that you're going to staff in this particular roster. So we're going to pick a handful of them here from this. Used to be on 2 different pages. So this is all the vehicles assigned to these various stations that I've set up for here. When we save this, let me get to one other item here. If we have a shift built and we want to pre-fill it from that shift, we can do that selection on this page. And in this case, we could select for Virtual Thursday 2020-12, and it will bring in the personnel that we selected on the previous shift. And you can see we dumped them in here to Engine 101. So that still works, and that's pretty nice. What I'm going to do though is we're going to go back to roster details and show you next what we can do as well. And this is a manual operation. If you want to do this, I'm going to select a few vehicles and we can save those particular vehicles. We do not have to use the pre-fill from shift if we don't want to. What we can do though is when we come in here, let me remove them. This page would look like, since I already pre-selected them, that's why they're on there for that demo. So if we're just building a roster from scratch there, what we can do is staff. We're going to staff these vehicles just by selecting the personnel. Now you see in this particular page, when we bring this dialog window up, we can select that we're going to bring in our personnel by shift, and we can pick a few of our personnel on here. You may want to open your page up to a few more entries so that your whole entire roster is visible for you there. So there we're adding some personnel to it. So we're going to add some personnel to the ladder company here. One other thing I have noticed, and in this particular thing, I'm going to cancel this and show you that we did have James that we added to Engine 101. If I add him now, see, I have his name available currently. Using this method to staff a roster, you cannot do this. One thing you do need to be aware of, though, is that you can't duplicate the personnel on apparatus. So I can put James on both of these, on ladder 1 and on engine 101. In the past, that's a function you had to circumvent a bit. Go ahead and throw a couple personnel in. Medic unit here. And then I'm going to staff this engine up at the other station. Let's pick some people from deeper on our roster. Add a couple people there. And as you can see, we can drop down and add them here. Now we can obviously use these filters at the top to make our big list smaller if we would need to. So that's the manual method of adding personnel to this. If we have personnel that are off duty, maybe because they're on sick leave, some item like that, we're going to add a couple personnel down there. And usually in this particular case, we will take these folks that are down here and set them to an activity code that may indicate that they're on maybe vacation, or maybe even on sick leave, some other activity code that you might have in your particular account. And maybe in this case, he's on injury leave. So you can see all those activity codes come over from your daily roster into here. So we've indicated there on a unassigned activity, vacation, injury leave, indicating they're not working on that particular shift that day. Now, here's the big new feature that we have. So let's say that we had to do a little bit of adjustment during the day. And let's say our good buddy Todd here, we need to put him, he's just became ill during the shift, and we need to take him off. So we'll change his activity code first of all, and I can take him and grab his card and drag it right on down here and let it go. And you can see we did drag and drop with Todd down here. If we need to move some personnel around, like Tony, we're going to move him from engine 301, slide him up here to medic 101, and just move him around like that. If we need to adjust their times, we can do so by selecting to edit them and adjust them as appropriate. So in this particular page, when we're looking at a daily roster, we can select roster details. This will allow us to edit it. We can add a narrative to the roster. Whatever I might need to let everybody know. In my roster, we can print this out. And we have a new condensed version of the roster that we have. Now this is going to print out a little bit smaller if I do a print from my browser function here. In the past, the roster such as this may have went to 3 or more pages, but in this case, it just condenses it down to 2 pages. So a little bit smaller view can be pretty helpful for you folks that are using that as a accountability page. We have quite a few folks that are doing that. Let's see, we can display the station log if we need to within the roster. And see, it's all in the bottom of the page. I don't think there's any activities in my daily log list, so nothing showing up here today on that. Another new feature that we have with the roster. Tell you what we're going to do is we are going to, this is going to be an open status. We're going to go back out to the main page and we're going to look at our calendar again, and you'll see here's that roster over here on Friday the 6th that I just made a few moments ago. Now let's say we're going to use this basically the same exact roster tomorrow or the next day. Maybe this is a 2448 department, so on Monday the 9th it's essentially the same roster. What we're going to do too is we can select to duplicate that roster. What I actually want to do is, let's go and edit this. We're going to go on this page, and we also have the duplicate button here. If I select that, we're going to select this roster to duplicate. When we select duplicate, it's going to ask us, okay, now where are you going to do this? Now right now, what we're going to do is select and change our ending time first. I'm going to come to the 10th and end it at 0700 on the 10th. And then on these, for my start date and time, I am going to make that the 9th. And my time retained, and set that. I can change my officer in charge, update my shift, it's appropriate. Next, all my apparatus that I had selected in the previous roster are here, and all of my personnel. So now we can just come in if we need to and make a simple adjustment if we need to on that roster. So that's a quick little demo of duplicating a roster. Essentially, we're giving you the capability to set up a, let's just call it a master roster that you can jump into and duplicate it and move it downstream. And it minimizes the keystrokes that you have to perform that activity. We also have the capability, and we have James like on 2 or 3 days, they're the same ones here. Tell you what, let's we're just going to remove him there. James, I know you're good, but I didn't think you were that good. Okay, so we're going to show you what we can do is we can also reassign. We can just check mark them in a bulk operation here. So if I need to take several personnel, and I'll take all 4 of them, and we're going to reassign them. And we're going to reassign them to the ladder truck here. I just moved those personnel down here to ladder 101 using a bulk operation, which is that reassign function. That's what that button or checkbox is right here. Initiates a reassign, a bulk operation for moving people around. If you have 2 or 3 or 4 people to move around, that may be quicker than dragging them individually. Or we can just go back in and drag them individually and drag and drop. Everybody should be out there clapping right now. This is a function that we've been asking for quite some time, and we are there now. And that is basically what we have to demonstrate for everybody. We've pretty much went through it. I will pause and ask Mac, James, Greg, Michael, Nicole, anybody out there have any questions you want to bring up and things to talk about that somebody's posted?
Yeah, we've got quite a few questions we're trying to get to, Mark. Right. There was one here. Here was a good question. When you are entering the duration of a shift, will it take anything more than 24 hours?
Okay, let's go back. And the answer is yes, it will. But I think the best practice is that we recommend 24-hour period the most. At least I would. So if I'm starting creating a brand new shift, I'm not going to associate it with the station. Let's give it a nice, pretty color that's not being used out here. And we schedule this. So we're going to start this on the 7th, run it out for a year. We'll start it at, let's just say 0600. I can't pick that off my clock as well. Just do that and I can slide them up and down. And my duration here. So yes, if I have a 48-hour shift, I can mark it as such. So let's go back down here. We're going to do days on and days off. I think what you're going to find is I'm going to show you how that renders out. So this is just going to be a on a day, off a day, on a day, off a day. So even though I mark this to be a duration of 48 hours up here, it only marks it for each day, not wrapping it over 2 days. I think that's what your question was getting to, James. So the duration up here, even though you can exceed 24 hours, the best practice would be to limit the duration of that shift to 24 hours. Let me take a look here. I'm pretty good there. So if I reset that calendar, that, yes, it will. So that's my answer to that, is a best practice. So if you're working a 24-hour or 48-hour shift, I know that's common out there anymore. Let's reset the calendar. Basically, what you would need to do in your rotation that you're noting here is put in 2, comma, -4. If you're on 2 24-hour consecutive days, that off for 4 days, that would be that rotation. Select the days, and you can see then it renders it out correctly on the calendar. So that's how that would work as a best practice. I would limit my duration of a shift to 24 hours. Hopefully that answers his question out.
Mark, we did have one, and I'm not sure if you covered it already. I was busy answering questions here. I apologize, but we had one said, can you enter duration of a shift to take longer than 24 hours, like 24.25 or 24 and a half?
Oh,
And I'm not sure of that. I haven't.
I know you can put the value in, but I was just
Yeah.
covering that if it's a duration, like basically your shift duration really shouldn't exceed 24 hours for my practice. Now you can experiment with that yourself to see how that works out for you, but
Right now, just to remember, this later on is going to encompass also payroll to move over to that, just like shifts and stuff do now. But this time the module is not in that, taking that in yet. So maybe that would be something we make sure, so that your payroll is going to read right if you're paying them for that extra 15 minutes or something like that later.
awesome. That may be a good thing to think about there, Mac. Thank you.
Mark, one other question that had come in here. So when you make folks unavailable, like you put them off on vacation leave, can you do a partial shift on that, or do you have to do the whole day time frame?
Well, let's go take a look. So we go to
Mark, while you're doing that, I just want to kind of remind a lot of folks. I know a lot of you are getting the answers of, hey, please send that, via the send feedback for functionality or feature requests. Please use that. We're not blowing you off when we say that. This is a direct line of communication. It's designed to go straight to the dev teams, where you can get it to them as quickly as possible and they can understand it. So please don't think we're pushing you off by saying, please use send feedback. We encourage that on everything you guys want to see here.
Absolutely, James. Thank you for reminding us all of that. So I did just throw that in for personal availability. There is no clock on this, so it only shows them unavailable for that particular day, 11/6 to 1/6 in this particular case. So the answer would be at this time, no. That is a great idea that you should put in that feedback, whomever asked that question up there. And Jared just put posted a question, I'm looking at it right now. Does making an individual unavailable automatically place them in the unassigned area? And Jared, the answer is no, not currently. And the one right above that is from Jonathan about cross-staffing apparatus. I am glad you brought that up, sir. We're going to go find a roster out here, like tomorrow's, the one for Friday, and show you how to do that. So let's say in this particular case, you can see here on Engine 101 and Ladder 101, we have James. Now we know he can't be in both places at one time. So one of the things we talk about when we're doing this is tying these assignments on the rigs to activity codes. And what I would have actually do here is I'm going to set him in this activity code in Engine 101 as his regular duty activity code. So he's on his regular payroll hours. And what we will do is show you if we see we've got activity regular. Now think of activity codes. I train people. The activity code really means payroll status, especially for the folk getting paid, career departments. Now, if we did not do something different down here for his ladder 101 assignment, it would look like in this particular day, he's working for 48 hours, but we know he's only there for the 24 hours. So we have in this set of activity codes, and this goes directly to Jonathan. I know some other folks out there may have this question. I have created an activity code for cross-staffed position. So when we actually add him to this, you'll see that activity code will be displayed there, cross-staffed. So how this ties into it is it'll work just for perfectly fine. If this engine goes on a call, his name's going to appear on the roster for it. If this ladder goes on a call, his name will appear on the roster for it. And usually we're not jumping between an engine and a ladder, but maybe a ladder truck and a medic unit, or an engine and a medic unit, some situation like that. So every time somebody's on a rig, go ahead and put their name in and have a special activity code like CS for cross-staffing. You have to go into your daily roster settings and set that up for you because it's not there in one of the default codes for that, but you can throw that in and indicate as such. And where this ties into is the reporting of it. I'm going to jump to the reports module, and hopefully I will remember the number of the report. I think it's 1299 report. So this is a daily roster, hours worked per activity code. So in this particular report, I have a saved list of removed cross staff. I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to come up here to edit that one, remove the cross staff. So all my activity codes are over here that's going to pull from and display, except for the cross staff position. Okay, beautiful. Jonathan just posted in there Thanksgiving. Awesome. So once I set that up in this report 1299, and you'll see, I'm just going to run this for James. And his name's going to appear on this list one time. And that's regular work schedule because we stripped out the crossed staffed positions out there. And that's how we would indicate that. And we can pull true and accurate hours of work by doing so. Hopefully that answered Jonathan's question and some other folks' questions they may have out there. How does this tie to the report? So let's go back into staffing and give my wingman and lady out there a chance to jump in and talk about anything else somebody's posting.
Mark, here's a good question. To add activity codes or project codes like you used to be able to do in the settings of the module, where do you add those in the new module?
Okay, so activity codes. Now here's one thing. You guys might want to write this down. This is some feedback. I'm gonna cheat for you and give you a little clue here. Now, when we were in, I'll just show you this way, in the daily roster module, and my roster for today that I made, when I am generating this, you can see that my activity codes are blank when I'm generating it. So when I get done with this, I've added all my personnel to it. If I go back to my open roster list, then I select that roster name again. Usually what's going to happen is those activity codes will drop in here automatically because I have them set. Let me check my settings because somebody may have changed that for me here. See, my default activity code is REG, so it should have dropped it in there. So maybe, just maybe, we stumbled on something that's happened to the programming in the background. So if we take that roster, usually when I select it here, it will drop by those default codes in here, and alas, it is not. So maybe if I create a new roster, I'll do this as fast as I can. I'm going to call this test 222. I'll only staff one rig at one station. We're gonna staff our helicopter. I'm really fortunate. We got a federal grant for that. And we're gonna add a couple personnel to it. So when I have those personnel added to it, and now I go to my open roster list, and if I go back in to that particular roster, usually my default codes, as you can see, will drop in automatically. So if I create that roster in the new staffing module, and I tested this over the last couple days, they do not drop in there automatically. And that's something we've already written a note on. But again, from you folks, if you are using those activity codes and you want them to drop in here automatically from them default codes, we need to get some input to the feedback, mentioning to our dev team that, hey, those activity codes are not dropping in there automatically like they do in the legacy daily roster module. That's one thing we did note. I'm glad somebody asked a question about that. Right now, the way I'd have to do it is go in and select to edit each individual person in here, and you can see my list of activity codes is here. Also, I can put them on a project code. I can also put them in a writing position if that's appropriate for me to do in this particular roster, if you need that data. So you can see here, I put them in as my activity, and they're sitting in the captain's chair on that apparatus. Let's go into Mr. Carter here, and you can see we can also change their display order as well. Maybe this person's on overtime today, and save that. You'll see in the roster where that displays right here. He's the engineer. He's on overtime and no project code. I just heard somebody break in. Do you have another thing we want to do?
Hey, Mark, I didn't, this is Greg. I didn't get a chance to test it, but I was going to test. Does the function of the activities and writing position, once you've logged them into one roster, did those populate if you duplicate the roster?
Well, Greg, I don't know. Let's find out. So this
Yeah,
is
I don't know either. I forgot. I meant to test it and I didn't get a chance.
today. So, I mean, it's an open status. So we're going to go in and we are going to, and I should have paid attention to my own directions here. We're going to go ahead and duplicate it right from here. So we could just know on Engine 101, we got 3 people with some activity codes and so a couple position assignments. So we're going to duplicate that one for today, and we're just going to call this copy 2. Go ahead and set my end time out here for later in the month. And my start time date. And we are going to take a look right here. So you can see some of the personnel I have here. Now, for some reason, it didn't like the fact that James was riding on the engine. And we're going to have to move him back up here, but it looks like it did keep those. For some reason, it moved his name down here, and I'm not exactly sure why. Oh, actually, it duplicated because now he's 2 of them up here. That's kind of interesting. We may have to write that up as a bug. Now I've got his name 3 times down here. I'm gonna have to do some testing and see why it's doing that. But yeah, it looks like right now, Greg, the answer is yes. That the writing position in that activity code did come into the duplicated roster. So if we come in back to our calendar, copy to is the one I called it, and you can see those here. And our other folks down here unassigned were the same way too. I can see Jared out there put a question in about changing the order that they appear down here. So I'm going to change all these. And I do not know if that's going to result in a difference in the print page or not. That did not change them in the order on the print page. It's a good question. Jared, thank you for that.
Mark had a few more that I've typed in. Any plans on adding a time clock software to any of these modules? And we're not aware of it at this time. There again, feedback, send feedback button. We really, some of them we've typed in there. We've let them know already that things that we've noticed, but please go at it in the send feedback, because that goes directly to the dev. So sorry to interrupt, Mark. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Perfect.
We've got tons of questions. We're trying to get to everybody as quickly as possible. So that was it.
Okay, I'm just going to scan through some of these questions as well, Mac. See if we have any that are unanswered out there. Looks like you guys are doing an outstanding job out there. So we answered Jonathan's question. He's left the presentation. So I think we got a happy customer there. So we've been successful in that regard. Okay, Jared. Okay, pre-fill from shift, Jared. Let me go back in and show you that. If we have the data in here. So that's on this page right here. So if I have a shift set up, I can use the pre-fill from shift button. We'll bring those personnel in to the appropriate apparatus. So we're going to pick that one right there. And as soon as I did that, and this must not have anybody put into it because we don't have any apparatus selected here. So let me pull that other one in. And I picked that one here. I'm going to do this bottom one there for today. And we may have removed some of those in here, but yeah, that's how that does that. When you pre-fill from the shift, it will bring them in. And when you do a shift, to make that work for you, let me actually get back into that, one of those shifts, because there's a very, very important function that we have to do. I'm going to pick this one, and we'll take a look at it here. And we have those personnel here like this. We have to have them, when we use that pre-fill from shift button, we need to assign them to an apparatus. If we don't assign them to an apparatus, what that does in our daily roster, and that's may have been what was happening to me and I did not recognize it. What it does is puts those personnel down here as unassigned. Then you'd have to go grab them all and move them where they need to be. So that's what will happen if you use a shift to fill this. You don't have them assigned to an apparatus. It will put them to unassigned. Then you'll have to move them to the proper apparatus. In a smaller department, probably not that big of a deal. A bigger department, probably a big deal. So that's what that. I'm hopeful we're getting caught up.
Hey, Mark,
Yes.
you want to go back into that shift where you were able to edit the individuals and just briefly show how the trades and vacations and things like that are accounted for, since we don't use the replace as a word in that screen.
So you're talking about right here, correct?
Yeah, the up and down arrows where you go ahead and click on those to
Okay, in
count
action,
for
let's say Robert needs to be replaced. The up and down arrows, we can select him with somebody else from the department, why they're being replaced. These are hard coded. You can't add or take away any of these on this particular case. And then we can put comments in if we need to, and then save it, and you can see I replaced them. That's what you're wanting to do. And I did fail to see that or mention that before. Okay, I see a question by Jake. Put it in there. How far out can you set your rosters? So the duplicate for Jake, the duplicate works wherever you want to out there, but you have to do something special with it. Let me go back and show you that. Since this is a new feature, I've done some practice with that, and hopefully I can answer your question here. So if we're going to take this particular roster and we're going to duplicate it, we're going to pull this roster, select duplicate. Now what you're probably seeing is if I start with my start time, it's going to recognize this end time right here and only allow me to start it before that end time. That's why I mentioned before, it's going to be best at this point in time if you take that end time and we're going to set this for the 29th of December. Now I can go to my start time and set it for the 28th of December. And we can move it wherever we want to downstream in the calendar, that way using a duplicate. Hope that answers your question, Jake. So the answer is yes, but you have to think a little bit different. Reset your end time first, and then set your start time the day before that in a typical 24-48 rotation anyway. So hopefully that will answer your question. I'm gonna go ahead and set this roster, and this is for way out in December there. Yeah, see, Kirsten Cole put a question in. When you replace a person, now you're maybe looking at through the shifts, replacing them through the shift. I have to think about that a second, because I see over here in our reports, we really don't have any reports based on the shifts module. So your best bet is to use the daily roster to indicate that through, and James gave you an answer by using a activity code for sick leave or so forth in that. I know Greg and his department used the shifts a lot, and a lot of the functions in there that I never used in my department. I don't think there's any reports that pulls out of the shifts module. Am I correct on that, Greg?
That's I've never seen anything pull out of the shifts module. And what Kirsten's question is more payroll module related. I can't answer that either, because unfortunately my department didn't use the payroll module. However, we did notice one thing, that when you do the replace function through the staffing module, through the shift side of the staffing module, right now you don't currently have the option of putting somebody just off on sick time, say, and creating that open shift. So that's one thing our development team's already been informed about, that they're going to have to bring back from legacy. The other thing is, James brings up a good point. So unfortunately, if you do replace them with like another person, you don't currently, through the staffing module, also have the opportunity to track that historical details of those changes. Although anything that is created in the current staffing module is talking back to the legacy shifts and the legacy rosters module. So you'll still be able to see it that way. But again, something our development team's been apprised that they need to make sure that they bring forward from legacy versions.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. For Cassandra out there, what we're talking about is a sick leave code is an activity code. So what I did was went to the legacy daily roster module into settings. And you can see we have a list of activity codes. And basically what I recommend is that you have an activity code for any type of payroll status, whether they're under regular pay, and there should be a pretty comprehensive list in there already. This has been modified some, as you can see, perhaps for you folks that are experienced with it. But if you have any type of payroll status, basically, if they're on vacation, injury leave, sick leave, Kelly days, whatever it might be, create that activity code in the settings for the daily roster, and you can pull reports off of that. Joe is asking about payroll is not connected to the staffing pay. Currently, it's not, Joe. That's something at the beginning of the presentation that we talked about is eventually the payroll module will be folded into the staffing module. And I really don't know all the ins and outs of how they're going to design that now. That is on the to-do list that our dev team is working on. We can just tell you that it's coming into the future. So Joe's a newbie. He's been a ER customer and on it for 2 weeks. So you're really new.
Mark, I do have a question on that though. If it backfeeds into the legacy module, shouldn't that pull it from the legacy module?
Well, there's no direct connection from the daily roster to the payroll. Payroll brings data into the payroll from the events module if you have it set up to do so. So let's go into payroll settings. So we can bring it in from incidents, training, events, or we can put time cards in. That's the only way we can get time data into.
Yeah, that's more what I was referring to was the time cards. Yeah.
Right. So the time cards are not currently connected to the daily roster. Now, boy, that's a great idea. I think whoever's asking that question. So that's feedback, please, feedback. Wouldn't that be nice if we could have a direct connection between the daily roster and time cards? That way, make your payroll fairly simple, actually. That is an excellent idea, even if James thought of it himself. Okay, I think we're getting caught up with the questions out there. Are there any that we need to bring up and that we haven't talked about yet? Because we are over a little bit. We want to limit this to about an hour, and we're over just a few minutes. Don't have a problem doing that. We just want to give everybody the opportunity to put in a question. So this is going to be your last chance just about then.
Mark, Brandon just asked a great one. Is it possible to see personnel working while in the month view? Think small part-time department with random people working random shifts.
So what we can do for that particular question, it's a great question, I might not have covered that, is you can view the series, view the day. So if I select, we're checking on the little eyeball to take a look at it, viewing the day, and we can go right to it and see those particular people that are on that particular day. So yes, I mean, it takes you to that particular shift. And how I did that again, let me show you again. So here's a shift. It's this one we call testing for Ryan. Since it's locked, we can take a look at it, view this day, pardon me, and we'll take you to that page for that particular shift, and we'll be able to see who's working, what time they started, and what their duration is. And you can see I don't have anybody assigned to apparatus here. So hopefully for Brandon, that answered his question.
Well, also, I believe, Mark, they can see it here, or, another thing where they can see it completely is in the calendar, because this does feed into the calendar, the shifts. So they can go in there and actually click on a day and they can see when they're scheduled. Because the second part of that, can they log in and view their schedule for the month?
So I went into that particular shift, testing for Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can click on a particular day and you'll see my shift list does appear all at once too.
Right, so either one, whichever you think's easiest, Brandon, would work. There again, the calendar is set that way also to see it. maybe a little bit cleaner for them to get into.
Okay, I want to get one more question Jared asked out there. Let me get back to my staffing module. And you can see we have for rosters anyway, some statuses for open, closed, and archived. So what happens, Jared, if we leave rosters open, such as these, let me just go into one of them. Then I'm going to close it. What happens if we close it? It's retained in a closed roster list. Now, the reports that pull from daily rosters will still pull this data. Those reports pull data from open roster and closed rosters. Now, if I take this particular roster and we archive it, then those reports do not pull data from that roster. And the other thing that is kind of a concern, it can be, is when we're looking in our rosters list, this thing can become very, very large with open rosters very, very quickly. This basically you're doing one every day or more. So if you set them to closed, we can still pull data from them. However, in our status, we can take a look at open rosters. It makes that really, really big list kind of small. So that's kind of a little primer for you on what to do with these. I recommend anyway that you take your open rosters list every once in a while, go into it and change some of them that are from last week or earlier this week to closed status. Remember, the reports will pull data from closed rosters, but not archived roster. Now, from this particular list, to close it, I have to edit the roster. And then right up here under my status, switch it to closed, and we're good to go. Now, if I need to archive it, we'll get back to that rosters list. I have let me pull up my open rosters to archive it, select my little file folder here, and boom, I have just archived that particular roster. Remember, the reports do not pull from archived rosters, and don't worry about how big your closed roster list gets. What you're trying to do in this particular function is to make your open roster list manageable with just a fewer number of rosters in it. And Brian, my friend Brian from up in North Dakota, how you doing today, Brian? And basically, James just answered your question. He was wanting to know, do we have a paper report that shows that staffing schedule? Unfortunately not. Man, that'd be some great feedback, Brian. Go ahead and take a few moments and put that in there. Yeah, so Ryan asked or mentioned, you don't have to enter a password now. Basically, to take an open roster and to close it, set it to closed, no password needed. You're already logged into the system, so we're not requiring you to do a password again on that. And you don't have to do that to archive it either. Mark Crooks asked, why would you archive a roster then? Well, you may have a roster that you made a mistake on, or somebody duplicated it for some reason. You don't need it for any kind of reporting purposes. Then we'll disappear it by archiving it. That's why we can maintain that capability to do that. Okay, we're going to give you guys about a few more seconds here. And with that, we're going to thank everybody for attending today. We had a great group. We have well over 100 people on with us when we started the presentation and through most of it. And we will welcome you to our Virtual Thursday next month. I think the date is December 3rd. And y'all want to stay tuned for that. We will be announcing the topic of that here in a couple of weeks. It's a very, very important and timely topic for everybody. So stay tuned for that. We've got one more question for Cassandra Ray about creating a shift to pay personnel or be different on a shift every month. Would it be best to create the shift every month? Basically, yes, Cassandra, I think it would be, unless one of our other trainers wants to chime in on that. I think that's going to be your best practice since there's different personnel every month.
Yeah, Cassandra, you mentioned specifically using the replace function to create those shifts every month. And I think you'd be better off creating a new shift, completely new shift each month. Especially if it's something you can predict, you could always set it up ahead of time and create multiple shifts, just, basically address them by month.
Perfect. Thank you, Greg. In Greg's department, they use that feature. So he's kind of our expert within our trainers about that. My department, we really didn't use that function. So I appreciate the answer, Greg. So with that, we're going to call this one a day and put this into the record book. Thanks everybody for attending. Stay safe out there, and we will hopefully talk to you guys next month. Thanks a bunch.